Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the first Federal Funding Symposium at an ASB conference. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to be here, and we were not going to let the pandemic stop us from finally making this happen, especially because we felt that there is a need for this now more than ever. We recognize that because of the pandemic, many of you probably have questions and concerns. So we made our slides and our pre-recorded talks available ahead of time. We hope you were able to find them at the bottom of the page for this session. And after some brief introductions, we plan to devote most of this hour to Q&A and discussion. We may be able to keep this open until 4:15. But if you have to leave at 4, don't feel like you're being rude. I will also mention that Dr. Eric Wolf from the DoD is not able to be with us in person today, but he did provide slides and a pre-recorded presentation. So please email him for any DoD related funding questions. So a few instructions and comments before we begin. We have a poll that we would like you to fill out to help us gauge our responses to your questions. ASB fellow Dr. Mary Rogers will be our moderator for today, so please send your questions to her in the chat box. And also the session is being recorded. Before we begin, I would like to give a very special thank you to Dr. Karen Troy, who is making sure that this session, as well as the entire conference, is running smoothly. She's been super helpful, amazing to work with, responsive, and I don't know that this would have been possible without her help. This also wouldn't have been possible without the amazing presenters and panelists that are here with me today. They jumped in with both feet, they've been engaged, they are passionate about wanting to hear from you and help you, and I'm so thankful for their dedication and their time. It's been a true team effort, and we hope that this symposium is helpful. So I will kick things off. I'm Jennifer Jackson. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering. I've worked at the NIH for more than 7 years now. I started on the intramural side of NIH doing biomechanics research in the clinical center. And for the past 4 years, I've been an analyst and data scientist with the National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research, or NCMRR, within the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, or NICHD. A few months ago, I was recruited for a special detail to the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, or NIBIB, for their Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics, or RADX program, which fast tracks development and scale up of new technologies to increase testing capacity for SARS-CoV-2. And it's one of the many ways that the NIH is specifically addressing the pandemic. So on this slide, you'll see highlights from my pre-recorded presentation, but what I want to emphasize is that the NIH understands that many studies have been interrupted because of the COVID-19 pandemic and will be as supportive as possible. So please check the nih.gov website, and I highly recommend contacting your program officer for more information. And speaking of NIH program officers, I will now hand the baton off to Dr. Lyndon Joseph. Lyndon?
Good afternoon, folks, and thank you for being here. As Jennifer said, we know this is a very interesting time, so we're happy that we have such a great turnout. My name is Lyndon Joseph. I am a program officer in the National Institute on Aging. I have been at NIA since 2009, and I'm an exercise physiologist by training, but most of my portfolio has to do with rehab, exercise, interventions that increase function and mobility in older individuals. And so that's why we are, at least I am here at the ASB to actually get you guys interested in doing aging research to help with mobility and function in the older individuals. And I'll pass you off now to John. John?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. My name is John Holden, and I'm really delighted to be part of this symposium, especially because I've been an ASB member for nearly 40 years now. I work at the NIH, and in particular for NIBIB, National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. I am a scientific review officer, or SRO, which involves being responsible for the peer review process that evaluates applications for their scientific merit. I've worked as an SRO for nearly 15 years now, first at the Center for Scientific Review at NIH, and then as part of my scientific program manager duties at VA, and for the last 3.5 years in the Office of Scientific Review at NIBIB. In my recorded presentation and slides, I provided a brief overview of the NIH application and review process and some tips for writing a competitive NIH application, very general tips. Just a few of my suggestions are listed on the slide that you see now. Although I have functioned as in a program official's role at VA and I work with program directors at NIH, my main goal on this panel is to try to answer your questions that you may have about the NIH peer review process. Because I believe that understanding this process can be helpful for researchers and applicants who seek NIH funding. So with that, thank you so much for joining. And I think, forgive me, I think that next is Dr. Laurel. Let me hand off to Laurel. Forgive me.
I think I'm next. Thanks, John. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Laurel Cookshouse. I am the program director for the Biomechanics and Mechanobiology program at the National Science Foundation. Delighted to be here at ASB. This was the conference that I quote unquote grew up in as a biomechanist, so it's always nice to see familiar faces. You can see my pre-recorded talk, and I hope that from that you'll take away that there's lots of opportunities to support biomechanics research from the National Science Foundation. And like everything, the answer to a lot of questions is you should talk to the program director, because things do vary across program a considerable amount. And much like Jennifer said about the NIH, NSF is keenly aware of all the challenges we have as researchers during this time that started with a pandemic and has continued to escalate or go downhill, whichever way you prefer to view that from there. So for those who are having particular trouble with existing NIH projects, you should always reach out to the program director. And I don't remember who's next, so I'm not going to pretend to guess.
It's Dorn. Dorn, you're up.
Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. I'm Dorn Carranza, Director of Innovation and Strategic Partnerships for the Center for Devices at the FDA. And as you may have seen in my presentation, I would like to discuss today opportunities for students, that can be undergrad students, grad students, postdocs, and faculty, to collaborate with the FDA. We do research, and as you can see in my background, that it says research happens here. So we do research, and we do biomechanical research. So happy to answer any questions related to how you can engage with FDA researchers to extend your research areas, and also collaborations with the federal government, and especially students that are looking for internships and fellowships. We have extensive number of opportunities to get trained as an undergrad student or grad student or postdoc. So thank you again for the opportunity, Jennifer, and happy to answer any questions later.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Scholes, and like Laurel, I'm a biomechanist, and I too grew up with ASB, so it's good to be back and good to be here talking with you. I'm now the Scientific Program Manager of Rehabilitation Engineering and Prosthetics Orthotics in the VA Office of Research and Development, and that's the device development portfolio where a large amount of biomechanics work is supported. There are several other different services and portfolios that are covered in my presentation, and also on that link down there. Like everyone else, I encourage you to contact us if you have any questions or would like to know where your research might fit in the VA. We are the largest integrated healthcare system in the US, and we support an intramural research program that's focused on veterans' needs, spanning all the research pipeline from benchtop preclinical work to clinical to implementation science and service level care delivery. A PI on a VA award does need a 5/8 appointment to receive funding, but not to apply. You can actually apply for funding with a letter of contingent appointment from the medical center director. So that takes a little more work up front, but it is easily doable. However, anyone can collaborate with VA PIs on a VA award. There's multiple mechanisms to do that. VA Career Development Awards in particular are a great way to launch a VA research career for early career investigators. It's 100% salary for up to 5 years plus research support. Most VA investigators have both VA and academic appointments. In case anyone wasn't aware of that, you can apply for funding generally from either of those appointments in multiple different ways. Our R&D panel purview, that's the service I'm in, is listed here. And that shows and describes what we fund on each panel. Please contact those program managers prior to submitting any letter of intent if you're interested in submitting an application. And that's all I have. I'll hand it off to Mary Rogers, our moderator now, for questions.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you all for all the panelists for your time and effort on this panel, and to Jennifer for being the person getting it all together. I'm delighted to see it going forward with this conference and in this format. My name's Mary Rogers. I have been involved in ASB forever, I think. I am currently the chair for the Council of Fellows, ASB Fellows, and I have been engaged with in different societies with trying to get facilitate funding panels like this, partly because of my my own stint at NIH, where I was working with NIBIB for 8 years. I will be the one that will be channeling questions to our panelists. If you would please put any questions that you have into the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat, and the panelists will also be able to see those questions. What I would like to do is start off with a question that I get asked a lot of times, which is, if it's really important for those who are submitting grants to get in touch with different program officers or different contacts, there are different ways, I think, that individuals like to be contacted, and maybe this is something that each of you could address. What is the best method for that, or a method that you prefer in terms of being contacted? I also am seeing the results of the poll, which is really interesting. It just gives us a little bit of an idea of the audience that is attending the discussion today. It looks like 21% are graduate students, 4% are postdocs, 56% are faculty members, 5% industry, 8% government employee, 2% medical health professional, and 3% other.
So Mary, while you wait for that, for questions, I can start by answering from the NIH perspective. What we do like is for people to send us an email, and an email and with a rough draft of what you intend to talk about, like the aims or the focus of your application. That way, if you send it to me and it doesn't fit my portfolio, I can find the appropriate program officer, not only within NIA, but within all the NIH institutes, because it could be more fit for NIAMS or for NCMRR or for NINDS. So email is the best way to do it. So you can log on to any one of the Institute's webpage, and a lot of them have the program officers listed and their interest, or at least their portfolio that they cover. But if you don't want to do that and you have my email or somebody else's email, it's best to just send them an email with a rough draft of the aims, or at least the focus or an idea of what you want to talk about. And that's probably the easiest way to contact us.
Thanks,
I
Lyndon.
agree with Lyndon.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. In my talk, if you haven't watched it already, I've got a recipe for the perfectly formatted email to the program director. Of course, you should feel free to improvise on that like you would any recipe. But it is nice to have a short white paper. It doesn't have to be your aims page, because remember, you're asking for money from the government. So you should tell me what you want to do with that money, not why it is so important, not this much about background and this much of what you're going to do. You should tell me what you would like to do with that money.
Yeah, and the same applies for VA for the same reasons. We want to find out where to send where your application will end up before you spend time on the phone explaining it to someone that won't be dealing with it ultimately.
Okay, great. Thank you all. It looks like we've got a question up now for the NIH panel members asking what initiatives and study sections are looking for in terms of biomechanics-based research. You want to take that one first?
So this is Lyndon again. So it really depends on the institute, okay? And like, for instance, for NIA, we have, we're interested in things that improve the mobility of all individuals, so that they increase their activities, doing regular daily activities. For NCMRR, I'm sure it depends as well. MCR goes a whole gamut from people who are functional to people with disability. So, so that all depends on what you're interested in. And I'm sure NINDS is the same. But what I like to tell people though is you shouldn't write to fit the agency. You should write to fit your career goals and where you see yourself 5 or 10 years down the road. And so that's why that page is very important. It doesn't have to be a polished page. It doesn't have to be your final aims, but it gives us an idea of where you think you're going. And then that's where we could fit you to the appropriate institute, whether it's NIA, NINDS, NCMRR, or NIAMS, or even NINR, nursing. You know, there are 27 institutes, and I forgot how many centers, but, you know, we all have a different mission. So it's more important for you to write something where you see yourself down the road, because that's how you're going to write your grant as well. And that's how the reviewers review the grant. You know, does this make you into an independent investigator?
I might, if I may, I might add something. Jennifer's talk mentioned that, yes, there are 27 institutes and centers. 24 of them fund research, extramural research. And Jennifer did a search for a 3-year period and showed that I think 22 of the 24 centers funding institutes actually had funded projects where biomechanics was a part of the focus. So it's broad in terms of the answer to the question about institutes. Like NIBIB is another one that does so. The other question had to do with study sections. They vary as well. Many applications end up being reviewed, or I'll say the majority of them end up being reviewed in the Center for Scientific Research. And those have study sections that are organized by groupings. The group that I was part of when I was there was the Musculoskeletal, Oral, and Skin Sciences, or MOSS group. And, but there are many others. And I think that in my recorded talk, I also gave a link, included a link to a place where you could search to try to identify the best study section that might match your interests. And the program directors can also help you. But don't be too concerned about study sections because you can suggest places for it, but ultimately the most important thing is to focus on what it is, the research that you're actually proposing. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Anyone else from NIH before we go on? If not, there's a question about submitting a K award. Would it, in terms of finding a program manager, would it be the same protocol to send an Ames page if it's a K award?
Yes, yes. This is Lyndon again. It is the same. It's the same protocol. So, and the difference there, though, and John can go more into that since he was with review. The K awards are reviewed internally, so you have to really structure the K award to where you see yourself down the road. So, if the K award is structured to be a geriatrician on aging biomechanics researcher, then it comes to NIA. If it's more of overall mobility and function or disability, you might go to NCMRR. If it's on design of robotics or some sort of assistive aid, it could probably go to NIBIB. So it just all depends on where you see yourself. And again, so that's why that page is important. So let's say you send it to me and there's no agent focus at all, because the K award is about your training. And so you're going to get training in that particular area. So if there's nothing on aging, and it has to do with musculoskeletal issues, I'll probably send you over to NIAMS, okay? If it's more on designing of robotics and assistive devices, I'll probably send you over to NIBIB.
I'd like to clarify one thing that Lyndon said. He said that those K awards are reviewed internally. That's not, I think what he means is they're typically reviewed not by CSR, but by the institute review branches. They still undergo peer review. So it's not an internal review, but a review by peers from throughout the research community. But those reviews are organized by people like me and now who work in the institute review branches. Otherwise, the protocol is the same.
Thank you. We have a question that is about the effects of the pandemic. How people are projecting that there might be effects on future funding. Is there a possibility that budgets are going to be directed to COVID-related research in the near future? Are there projection budgets for the next few years?
That's the $1 million question. We don't really know. I can tell you for FY 2020, there was no funds allocated to COVID-related research in the regular RPG budget, but then there were additional funds, but it was specific, and Jennifer can tell you more about that because she's involved in one of those. But in the individual ICs, we did do some supplemental funding, but that had to come from the original allocated budget. Going forward, we have no idea. We'll just have to wait and see what Congress gives us. If they give us just a regular budget without any COVID funds, then we'll have to make a decision at that time. But for right now, it's all a guessing game.
Yeah, I'll add to that it is, as agency workers, it is not our place to speculate what Congress might give to us. But NSF did receive supplemental funding for COVID. I believe that it was on the order of 74 million that went out the door for our rapid response and eager mechanisms.
And the NIH got $500 million for their 4 different RADIX programs. And then the active program, which is working on therapeutics and vaccines, also received money from the last stimulus. So I don't know if any biomechanics research is specific for those things, but you can search for that on the NIH website.
Thank you. So the next question has to do with the VA. Are there special qualifications that you need to compete for VA funds as a faculty member?
Well, on the clinical side, you need whatever clinical licensing and qualifications to get credentialed at the VA facility. If it's PhD or otherwise, there's no special qualifications other than needing that contingent letter of appointment. So the way that would work, if you're applying to be a VA PI and you aren't one already, you need a letter from the medical center director saying, if you get funding for this position, we'll give you this position, which isn't usually that difficult as long as they realize what it is and how it works. But that being said, you have to make the case to the review panel that you need a full 5/8 level of appointment on the one award, which can be done, but is somewhat difficult. That's why career development awards work so well to get into the VA system, because they're by definition up to 100% salary. So you get that one award and you have your VA appointment built in. So that contingent letter of appointment mechanism is often done in career development awards. But in terms of competing for VA funds, I have had master's level, very experienced engineers be PI on development related awards. So we don't even require full PhDs for everything. It's are you qualified to do the work you propose to do?
Thank you, Brian. The next question has to do with, is a question to each of the agencies asking if there are resources for determining whether a proposal will fill a gap in the portfolio for any current funding cycle, or is it just based on what other proposals are received in that cycle? That was for each agency.
So I'll take a first stab at that. You know, for gaps in the funding portfolio in terms of topic, you know, there might be internal tools at NSF, but I would be unable to confirm or deny that if it's internal. But in terms of if you want to look at our portfolios and see, you know, what type of work is often funded in a specific program, or, you know, and make your own guesses about a gap as part of your preparation for talking to the program director, of course. You could use our award search feature on NSF's website. You can search for things funded by a specific program, and at the top of the results, there's this little tiny button that says download to Excel. You will miss that button if you don't know to look for it. But you should hit that button, download it to Excel so that you can sort things and read things to your heart's content in an easier to digest format.
Yeah, on the VA side, we have primarily investigator-initiated research, but we do indicate direction through special emphasis areas on those RFAs. And these change from cycle to cycle, so it's really important to work off the current RFA, or you might be addressing one that has been removed or not know of a new one. A couple of those that might be of interest to this audience are prosthetic and assistive technology needs for women veterans, exoskeletons for non-spinal cord injury, and recently along the COVID line, this one was just added last cycle, is rehab-related effects and treatments for COVID-19, secondary effects, influence of comorbidities and risk factors. So all of those have been highlighted that their gaps either indicated by us or indicated by Congress that we need to do more research in. There's a few others listed in my presentation, but that's the way VA indicates those areas.
Anybody else? NIH approach?
For the NIH, just like the VA, more like 90% of our applications are investigator-initiated, hypothesis-driven research. But we do, the institutes do what we call requests for application, RFAs, and those are, yes, to address certain gaps. And those gaps usually result from either workshops or ideas generated within the institute that needs to be filled. We do portfolio analysis sometimes to see what's lacking or what needs to be done. But the majority of applications are actually investigator initiated. What I do recommend is you call the program officers if you have an idea, and talk to the program officers, and they could give you an idea whether or not it's of interest to each particular IC. You know, for instance, some people might have an idea related to musculoskeletal issue, but they want to do a clinical trial. NIAMS have certain ways they want their clinical trials done. Some institutes want you to look at more mechanistic studies. Some institutes want you to look at more outcome-related studies. So it's just calling them and see. But we do have RFAs, and I can't remember the link off the top of my head. I was trying to find it while the question was being asked, but I couldn't find it. But if you send me an email, I can send you that link. And what it is, it's signing you up to get a notification whenever an RFA is released by any one of the institutes, and you just get that weekly. So if an RFA is released on anything related to biomechanics or exoskeleton, you will get that RFA notice.
Great, thank you.
Mary, if I may, this is Dorn from FDA.
Uh-huh.
Although we don't give funding, we post on our website research priorities that are typically regulatory science gaps to direct research. The research that we do, we call regulatory science research, and basically it's research to develop the scientific evidence needed to assess the safety and efficacy of innovative medical technologies and devices. And so if you go to our website, or you can Google CDRH, that's the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, along with research, you know, CDRH space research, you'll go to a web page where you'll see these programs and priorities for these different programs that can help understand what are regulatory science research gaps, what are public health, especially related to medical devices, gaps that can help you in defining research and even, you know, collaborations with our internal labs.
Great, thank you, Dorn. The next couple of questions have to do back with the COVID topic. One is there going to be any consideration of what's going on with COVID in terms of the requirement for pilot data in proposals? Will that be any part, will there be any additional review criteria that would be related to maybe the less of an expectation for pilot data?
I can speak a little bit to that, I think. That's a good question. I think NIH recognizes that some folks will, because of the pandemic circumstances, have difficulty collecting their preliminary data and the like. So for applications that are submitted for this, for dates that began back in May, and for review meetings that are going to be held this coming fall, ordinarily the post-submission materials that are allowed is very limited. But for this round only, NIH is going to accept a one-page update with preliminary data as post-submission materials. That assumes that, of course, preliminary data is allowed in the funding opportunity announcement that you're responding to. So the answer is you'll have an opportunity to provide some additional preliminary data as post-submission materials, which are due 30 days before the review meeting, as opposed to having to be incorporated in the application. The other thing that I will mention is I put it in the chat is there is a website for all NIH applicants and recipients of NIH funding where there's some information pertinent to COVID-19. So I hope that that's helpful. You might look in the chat for that link.
Great, and go ahead. As a follow-up around the different currently funded grants, there are certainly some problems that are now being encountered in terms of those studies already funded that have in-person human subjects research. Is there any advice that you all have for those that are in the middle of those studies?
This is Lyndon from NIA. That is an excellent question, and we've been getting a lot of that lately. And my guess it probably has to do with funds, because some people might have enrolled subjects that got lost to follow up, and how do you recoup that? Right now, we don't know what the process is going to be for that. What we're advising people is to, re-budget your funds accordingly. Up to 25% you can re-budget without getting permission from NIH. Over 25%, then you didn't have to talk to the program officer and see how you're going to re-budget. Especially if you're in the middle of the study. I don't think we're going to be given administrative supplements in the middle of the study, but then at the end of the study, if you can tie the need for additional funds because of COVID, we will make those decisions on an individual basis, on a case-by-case basis. So the advice that we're given, at least at NIA, I don't know about the other institutes, is to rebudget accordingly to help you to continue fulfill the goals and the aims of the study. And then towards the end of the study, if you do need additional supplemental funds, you'll just have to apply for an administrative supplement, and then we take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I'll add some information from the NSF side, because NSF is keenly aware that all of our research community has been affected in different ways, not just human subjects, but cells have died, animals have died, longitudinal studies have been interrupted and may need to be restarted. So a couple of things. Thing one is that NSF does have a recovery planning task force that is looking at lots of general problems that everyone has, as well as discipline-specific problems. So if you've got particular situations that are unique to your project, beyond general things that all biomedical engineers and biomechanists might be facing, you should make sure your program director is aware of those, because that's how the recovery task force listens to the community. And also, if you're in an immediate bind, like your proposal is about to run out of time and/or money, you should reach out to your program director, because we can't help if we don't know what the situation is. That's not an open call for requests for supplements, because it's anyone's guess if there might be additional money forthcoming for that. We just don't know at this point. But we do want to make sure that if there's an urgent need, that we do what we can to take care of it.
And this is John. I'd like to piggyback on a little of what Lyndon was saying. I want to encourage people again to go to the link that I put in the chat, because on that page, there is a link further down to information about guidance for NIH-funded clinical trials and human subject studies affected by COVID-19. And for example, I'm just reading from it. It says, if unanticipated costs are identified due to impacts of COVID-19 and unobligated balances are not available to rebudget, recipients may request administrative supplements from the funding ICs. But it also says that the decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis. So mostly I encourage you to look at that page and to find the link to the specific NIH notice about it. So there is something about it. Lyndon did a good job of describing what the NIA, the Aging Institute, is doing, but it may vary across different institutes. That's all.
Thank you. So the next question is one that is from someone at a undergraduate focused university who does not have consistent students for long term. This person is looking to see what options there might be for short-term projects that are geared for the undergraduate students. They don't have a long program, so it would need to be short-term projects. Are there any suggestions about grants for that type of situation?
Yeah, I can start with that because NSF actually does have a mechanism called Research at Undergraduate Institutions, or RUI. You can Google for that and find the solicitation. So it's for proposals designed to be completed at undergraduate institutions, and they are reviewed within the context of, like all NSF proposals, reviewed within the context of the environment in which the work would take place. You know, certainly taking into account the resources. Other things that are good to know are that in many programs, you know, there is a traditional 3-year timeline for a proposal, but that's not necessarily a requirement unless the program director says so. I, for one, am happy to take proposals that are of shorter duration and smaller budget if that works better for people at smaller institutions or who might only want to commit to a shorter duration project. But again, like everything else, check in with the program director first so they know that it's coming and are aware of what your intent is.
Any other options from others on this short-term grant project question?
Yeah, for NIH, it's a little bit more difficult, at least the ones that I'm aware of. I don't know if John is aware of any other ones, but the way that it can be done from NIH, you unfortunately have to have an NIH R01 grant, and you can then probably bring them in for the summer to work on your project. You can do that through an admin supplement. We also have diversity supplements to bring in diversity students into that. That's the one way. The other way is we have what we call R15 grants, where it's to actually bring up undergraduate students into the research fold. And so you apply for an R15 grant to your project, and then you get funds to bring students in. The R15 grant run for 3 years, so then you can bring students in and out your lab for the time of the grant. That's the most direct way that I'm aware of. The other one is the diversity supplements to bring in all type of students into your research, but you have to have an R01.
Thank you. The next question has to do with the different initiatives that are looking to diversify study section members with the intent of reducing implicit bias or other non-science factors. And the question is, are there any updates on those efforts from any of the agencies? So this sounds like a review question, John.
Yeah, I was just starting to say, the question is related to review. I know I don't have any specific updates that I can provide right this minute. I know that it's very important for NIH regards this as a really important issue, but I'm not up to date on the latest efforts. Yeah, I'll do some searching while we're, as the symposium goes on. You might look again on the NIH website or the CSR website, Center for Scientific Review. But I don't have any new updates, sorry.
I can speak a little bit about NSF panels and diversity. If you don't know, at the National Science Foundation, program directors are also the ones who curate the panels. And it is actually in our operations manual that we must consider aspects of diversity when forming our panels, although it is not prescriptive about what kinds of what exactly diversity means. But it is something that we are expected to consider. Again, every program director is different, but I can tell you in my programs, I always strive to have diversity of all stripes. That means in the usual ways we think of diversity, like gender and race and all of those things, Also diversity in career level experience, experience as an NSF reviewer. I always like to get in some new people. And in terms of representation from schools, big schools, small schools, geographically across the country, the whole gamut. One thing you can do to help us keep and get new reviewers in and improve our diversity is when you submit your NSF proposal, there is this optional document for suggested reviewers. And I always look at that. Program directors are not obligated to look at that, but I value it. And if you think like a program director and populate that list with a diverse set of reviewers, that means no one you have a conflict of interest with. And I always say, kind of tongue in cheek, please don't give me 3 old white guys who are all from California. So if you give us some suggestions, that is always helpful.
Thank you. Any of the other organizations?
I want to. VA is very similar to NSF in that while we don't have any specific guidance, we know it's important. We do our best. I'm in charge of finding the panel members for my own panel, and I do strive for diversity across all of the things Laurel just said. But the suggested reviewers is interesting because I've suggested that before and they wouldn't let us do it. So interesting to hear that.
I was going to say,
again.
Thank you. Well,
this is John Holden. I want to say, NIH treats it very differently than NSF and VA do, than NSF does. VA and NIH do not suggest specific names of people. You can indicate the expertise that's needed, but you should not indicate specific names.
Thanks for clarifying.
It might have the opposite impact. The SRO might, in fact, consider that that person is maybe in conflict with the review of your application. So please do not include specific names of suggested reviewers.
So definitely some differences among the agencies in that approach.
And there's also, the other thing that I'll mention is there's also an early career reviewer program that CSR has, and part of its goal is to diversify the pool of reviewers. I'll put a link to that information about that program in the chat for everyone.
Great, thank you, John. So the next question is for you, Jennifer, and it's regarding the Rehabilitation Research 2020. Can you give a preview on what the change is and the projected need from 2016?
Sure. So when we wrote the original plan, or the last plan in 2016, we did it without a lot of data. And so now we have the data to show where the gaps are, and we'll be able to put out funding opportunities based on that information. We're not seeing a lot in the area of community and family. Some of that, caveats to the way that we're coding it is, if something's a clinical trial, then it's automatically primarily in the research design and methodology category, even if it is focused on caregivers. So that would be secondary. So we do have a decent percentage of projects that have, a secondary, or what we're considering a secondary category code for the community and family. But one thing that's really exciting about this, the rehab conference, is you'll have an opportunity to participate in the update of the plan. So if there are specific research interests that you're interested in and maybe you feel like aren't being heard or represented, you can speak up. I believe we're going to put out another RFI around the time of the conference, a request for information. And so you can submit that way. I do recommend, checking out the conference. It's free. It's virtual this year, which was, not ideal, but that's just where we are right now. I think, So, I mean, that's the major category that I'm seeing, but yeah, I'm happy to talk more with you offline about that.
Thanks, Jennifer. So the next question has to do with the number or the previous publications that a person has in when they're putting in their grant applications. Is there, I guess the question is there a need for a certain number in the particular area of the grant application in order for it to be successful? I'm paraphrasing there. But I think the question has to do with how much weight is put on whether the person has a large number of publications in the area that they're applying for.
I guess I can go first from the NIH perspective, and I guess John can follow up with there. Publications do help, and we know that publications do help, but it helps better if it's in the area that you're proposing, if you have the expertise in that area. So you can have 50 publications in exoskeletal work, but you want to do a publication on shoulder movement, but there's no publication on that. That's not going to view it because they're going to say you don't have any expertise in the area. And that's why the BioSketch, that is the NIH BioSketch, actually have you talk about the work that you've done that contributes to the specific grant that you're writing. So publications do help, especially in R01s. And not only that, that actually also helps with giving the preliminary data that you need to convince the reviewers that this is a project worth funding. So publications do help. How much? I don't know, but at least enough to convince the reviewers with R01s that you know what you're talking about. You know how to collect the outcomes. You know how to analyze the data. You know how to recruit subjects. If it's animals, you know how to house animals and do the sample collection, and so it does help in a way.
I assume that's pretty much true across the agency. Is that not true?
So NSF is a little bit more nuanced than that. If you read our policies and procedures and awards guide, and I think I just butchered that acronym, but it's the PAPPG, you will notice that NSF does not require preliminary data. So it is not required. It is a myth that it's required, but whether you have preliminary data or not, this can certainly influence the reviewer's perception of how well you might be able to carry out the work. One way to convince the reviewers that you can do this work would be to have some preliminary data, but there are certainly lots of other ways to do it. So if you're low on preliminary data, I'd encourage you to put on your think like a reviewer hat and wonder how else you can convince these reviewers that you are indeed capable and qualified to carry out this work.
Great, thank you. So the next question has to do with FDA. So this one's for you, Dorn. The question has to do with what funding opportunities are available in biomechanics at FDA and how a scientist or biomechanist best collaborates with FDA.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to share the question with L'Oreal. Actually, we are working on a very interesting initiative. So the FDA and NSF have a program called the Scholars in Residence program that provides funding for students, undergrad students, it's grad students, postdocs, and faculty to come to the FDA, spend a year, and the funding is up to $100,000 for that 1 year. And we are encouraging applications from this community to be able to come to the FDA, have a mentor, have the opportunity to learn about research priorities for the FDA pretty much, and for emerging technologies and emerging devices that impact biomechanics. So that's one funding mechanism and an opportunity we have. The funding comes from NSF, and that's why I would like to allow L'Oreal to say a couple of words related to that program.
Sure. So the name of the program is the NSF FDA Scholar in Residence Program. I think there's about to be a link in the chat window if one of my colleagues puts it there. But it is exactly what Doran described. It's an opportunity to collaborate with someone at the FDA. If you're wondering, how do I find a collaborator at the FDA? I don't know anyone there. Certainly reach out to me or Doran. We work together to help people establish some connections that are, of course, important. If you want to go to the FDA, you have to have a collaborator or mentor there. This is a terrific opportunity. I'd encourage you to all look at the solicitation. And again, like Doran said, you can go as a faculty member. You might, for those eligible for sabbatical, you might think, oh, that might be a nice sabbatical. You can send your student there, which is another wonderful opportunity, or your postdoc.
Great.
Thank you, Laura.
Great. Thank you all. This may have already been answered. So this is for NSF, which of the fellowship programs for graduate students supports biomechanics research?
Yeah, so that sounds like a question about our graduate research fellowship program. And so that certainly you can do biomechanics research. One thing that we've learned over the years that is really important is that when you submit your GRF application, this is geared mostly towards the students in the room, you're asked to identify a discipline that your work fits into. And for many of us in the ASB community, it's going to actually come in through the disciplines of bioengineering or biomedical engineering. If you send things into the biology directorate, there is a program there called Physiological Mechanisms in Biomechanics, also has biomechanics in the name. But that program deals mostly with biology questions that can be answered with biomechanics, not questions that have to do with human health. So if your biomechanics work has anything at all to do with human health, make sure that you submit it to either biomedical engineering or bioengineering or mechanical engineering if it's really, more mechanics based. And if you have questions about that, absolutely, you can reach out to the Graduate Research Fellowship Help Desk, talk with your advisor who will probably be able to advise you on that. And if your advisor isn't sure, you can ask them to contact the program director.
If I may, Laurel, another program I think is the intern program that is for grad students to come to go to non-academic settings to do research, and that is a supplement, I understand. And I'm aware of that because we host also grad students as the FDA qualifies as a non-academic setting under that solicitation or DCL.
That is fantastic. I didn't know that they could go to the FDA on those. So there's intern supplements for anyone who has a current NSF award, and these are research awards, not graduate research fellowship awards. If you would like your grad student to have an internship experience, you can apply for an intern supplement that will help you pay for up to 6 months of that graduate student's time to go have an internship that is related to their research, and they can go to, maybe one of your industry collaborators or one of the industry collaborators that you wish you had, especially now as we're hearing that many industries are and companies are cutting back on their paid internships. This might be a particularly welcome opportunity.
Great, thank you very much. I want to make sure that everyone is seeing that in the chat there are a number of different links and resources that are being put in the chat. So I hope people are taking a look there and making copies of those that look like that they might be helpful. So there's a question here about if NSF and NIH can talk a little bit about the Smart and Connected Health grants. what kind of work needs to be proposed. Is it more development or more translation? And that's specifically about the smart and connected health. So that's in NIH and NSF,
yeah.
right?
Unfortunately, I don't know much about it because I'm not the program officer that deals with it. Parther, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, at NIA is the program rep, and Wendy Nielsen is the rep at NSF. I know for NIA, at least for some of the NIH, we're looking for translational type work. You know, how can you use that to actually improve the health and condition of the individual? That's what I know they're looking for NIH. For NSF, I don't really remember if what stage it is they're looking for. But if you send me an email, I can connect you with Parther or Wendy Nielsen at NSF, or Parther at NIA. Or any other one of the NIH rep on that announcement, so that you can talk specific directly with them.
Yeah, I can add on the NSF side, you know, this is an area that NSF is interested in. As far as where on the, you know, foundational work to translational work continuum NSF's interests lie, I always feel a little bit silly when I say, remember that the S in NSF stands for science. So we are first and foremost interested in advancing our knowledge. We care about translation, we care about it a lot, but it is our mission to advance our scientific understanding of the world. So that's kind of the end of the spectrum for smart and connected health that NSF's interests lie.
Okay.
And this is John. I just put a message in the chat with an email address for an NIBIB program director who deals with that NSF NIH Smart and Connected Health program. Her name is Tiffany Lash, and her email address is there, and she could probably answer questions much better than I could.
And to add to that, Tiffany Lash is also one of the leaders of the Radix Tech program, so please be patient. If you email her, she will likely respond back to you, but it may take her a little bit.
Right. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, the next question has to do with the selection of mentors for K Awards. The question is, does the mentor or mentorship team have to have had previous funding experience with the agency, or is the area of expertise more important?
I can start out from the NIH perspective, or at least from the NIA perspective. Previous funding, it's sort of important, but what's more important is the mentorship that they're going to provide for you in the training period. One of the reasons why they do like to see you have funding is that we know that the K Award does not cover, especially for human-related work, does not cover all the resources and supplies that you may need to cover the experiments. And so it'd be nice if the mentor has some sort of funding to help you out. But really and truly, one of the sections, and John can talk more about this, is the mentoring part of it, the career development portion of it. So the mentor has to have the experience to provide the training that you need. And not only the primary mentor, the mentoring team as well, you know, because the training is to help you develop in an area where you think you need to concentrate on, where you're not exposed to that type of training. So let's say, for instance, you have an engineer who wants to come over to aging research, and all they did was a lot of robotics, but they've never applied it to the aging and mobility. I would say get somebody who does robotics and aging as your primary mentor, and not somebody who just does robotics in younger individuals, okay? You can have that person on your team because of the expertise that they're gonna give you, but your primary mentor, if you wanna come over to aging, has to be able to really relate to you in using robotics with aging.
I would second what Lyndon just said. And so the primary mentor does not, it's not a requirement that they have NIH funding, but it's certainly helpful because one of the areas in which the mentor is going to be providing guidance, these are career development awards, is in the area of securing funding. And the goal of the award is usually to develop people into independent researchers. The other thing that I'll mention, Lyndon reminded me that one of the criteria is the mentors, co-mentors, collaborators, and so forth, the team that's going to be assisting one. If you want to find the review criteria for any NIH that are going to be used for review of any NIH application, look at the funding opportunity announcement and go to section 5, section V of the funding opportunity announcement, and it's very explicit. It tells you exactly what the criteria are. So, and in the case of Ks, that's one of the 5 scored areas. I hope that helps.
Thank you. So clearly there's an awful lot of interest and concern about what's happening in the environment right now with COVID. There's concern about the fact that labs have been shut down. There's concern about people who are newly coming into as faculty members during this time when they are not going to be able to be collecting pilot data, but they are going to be putting in career applications, early career applications, or other submissions, and they want to get your suggestions for how they might strengthen those applications that will be coming in the real immediate cycles. We don't know what's going to be going on next year, but for right now, in the near term, do you have any suggestions for those that are submitting applications now?
That's a tough one because I do understand the boat you guys are in, especially if you're coming in for R01s. You are going to need pilot data. The pilot data is what's going to convince the reviewers that you can perform the duties that you say you're going to do. You can carry out the research. You can take it from beginning to end, which is design the study, collect the data, analyze the data, publish the data. I really have, I really have no advice for that, except that, you know, if you're going to do an R1, try to get as much preliminary data as you can. Yeah, it's a tough one. It is a tough one, and I get a lot of those questions, and I really it hurts me because I don't know how to answer that. The only saving grace I can give you, if you do have some small preliminary data, NIH do give additional bonus points to early stage investigators. That's 10 years following your training, and new investigators, and that's somebody who has never had an NIH grant. I don't know how the other institutes do it, but for NIA, for new investigators, I think we give 3 percentage points, and for early stage, I think we give 5 percentage points. But that's for FY 2020. I am assuming it's going to be the same for FY 2021, but we don't know. But we still, right now, we are given additional bonus points to early stage and new investigators. And also, those grants are reviewed in a batch. Over the years, NIH have realized that when you review, and John can clarify that a little bit more, the early stage and the really established investigators, the grants are not reviewed in the same batch anymore, because the reviewers are advised to give a little bit of slack to the early stage investigators. So maybe CSR might be working on something related to that. I don't know. And so maybe John can actually talk to that if there is anything going on in review.
Thanks, Lyndon. I'm not at CSR, but to the best of my knowledge, this is what happens. In a review meeting, there's often multiple different mechanisms, R01 applications, smaller R21s, and so forth, and they are clustered together so that the panel will consider all of the R01s, then all of the R21s, and so forth. Among the R01s, those from new investigators are clustered separately so that the panel will be aware, oh, we're now looking at a group of R01 applications that are coming from new investigators, and that's taken a little bit into account. Early stage investigator is just a subset of the new investigator. Not only have they not received a major NIH award, but they're also early in their career stage. And the only other thing that happens is that summary statements for the new investigator R01 applications are usually tried to be completed first. That's about all that I have.
Thank you. Are there any other?
Yeah, can I
yes,
just
Lauren.
add a few things on the NSF side? Obviously, all of us, and that means the program directors, the PIs, and the reviewers are aware that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. You know, our colleagues who do experimental work are perhaps more affected right now than our colleagues who do computational work. And that doesn't even get into differences in those who have caregiving and household responsibilities and those who have less of those. So, you know, these are things that will be on reviewers' minds as these applications are reviewed. It's kind of up to you how you use your 15 pages of your NSF project description. If you wanted to put in a little bit about the preliminary data that you would have collected, if you think that would help make a compelling case, you could certainly do that. You can put whatever you want in your 15 pages of the proposal. I wouldn't spend too much time on that because you really want the reviewers to know what you're planning to do, rather than, you know, what your own personal sob story might be. But if that kind of context would be important, you could certainly put it in there. In many NSF directorates, we have no deadlines, which means rolling deadlines for our unsolicited proposals. So you could always delay and submit later, but for programs like our career awards, that is a fixed deadline. So you have to either get it in or wait a year. But think about, you know, restructuring your proposal if it makes sense, editing your education goals to be COVID appropriate if it makes sense. It's your proposal, so you do you and do what you can to make it work.
Great, thank you. Thank you. If there are no other inputs on that one, I think it is time that we need to wrap up this session. We need to do that, and I believe, Karen, can you tell us about where discussion might be continued?
Yeah, I'm actually going to pop back in here. So I've been lurking in the background. Nice, great session, everybody. If you want to continue the live session, then I've designated the Qualsys Spatial Chat Lounge for anybody who's able to pop over there and continue the live discussion. If you would like to continue text discussion, the Slack channel is designated. It's the Symposium Federal Funding Slack channel. And at this point, unfortunately, we're going to have to close this meeting so that we can get ready for the award session that will start in 15 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Karen, and thank you to all the panel members and to Jennifer. This has been a very helpful session, and we will look forward to continued discussions.
Thanks for the great questions, and thanks to Mary Rogers for sorting them.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.